Andrew Bissell will be joining us next, lighting director at Cundall Light4, and the presentation will be challenging the balance of power using research and knowledge to design lit spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invite. Thank you, Kevin. But first off, thank you to all of the researchers who pour their heart and soul into the work that they produce, because as a lighting designer, it's that work and the ideas that are coming forward from that work that keeps us excited and keeps us on our toes and keeps us moving forward. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that we've worked on where we've introduced ideas from research, new techniques, software, into our work ahead of it being involved in the included in the lighting guides, etc. I'm also going to talk about a couple of experiences we have on projects where perhaps there's a little bit more work needed, such that we can bring innovation and research forward more quickly. So, sorry, let me just go back. So this is our office in Manchester. This is the first project. This was about 7 years ago, and as you can see, we're blessed with daylight in this office space. And we've just finished working with the EFA, bringing John's climate-based daylight modelling into the EFA standards, such that schools would be designed using climate-based daylight modelling. And we wanted to look at how we would do that within an office space as well. But not just on the horizontal plane. We wanted to have a look, because of the WELL document that was out, and because of the equivalent melanopic lux that they were talking about, we wanted to start to see if we could use those two things together to understand the space we were about to move into. And the key here really as a lighting designer is what we've actually done is to limit what we're going to try on this project, such that we can then measure that at the end. We're not trying 5 or 6 things, we're going to try a couple of things first and see where we get to. And also it's about letting everybody know what you're up to, letting people know that you're trying something new, you're going to be looking at the benefits, but you're also going to be looking at the risks as well. So this is some of the analysis that we prepared for the office space. I think we might be on auto slides here, sorry. So this is the analysis we prepared, and we were just looking at the amount of daylight we could actually get into the space vertically at each desk, so we could see how that was going to relate to people and the equivalent melanopic lux. Now, there's a whole host of data there. This is just this one particular slide, but what it did for us is it gave us an indication of what we could achieve with the daylighting, and therefore what we had to do with the electric lighting, if you like, such that we didn't necessarily have to think about the electric lighting, as people call it, this human-centric lighting, tunable white lighting, etc. We could actually just look at the electric lighting separate to daylight. So what we actually did was to decide on using 3000 Kelvin lighting in the space, and not just 3000 Kelvin lighting, but because we knew we only had to top up the daylighting in the space, we would only have 150 or 200 lux of 3000 Kelvin lighting in the evening. So with everyone having received that high during the day, we could start to bring them down from that high in the evening and send them home, hopefully in the right condition and the right frame of mind. So it was the analysis that then told us what we should be doing, what the proposal should be, and what the trial should become. And it's that process of letting everyone know what you're going to look at, actually analysing it, coming up with a proposal, and moving forward. So where we ended up then is, once we moved into the space, it was very much a case of measuring what we had. Were we getting what we thought we were going to be getting? Were we getting the lighting levels, the vertical lighting levels? And Kenny and Liz did a huge amount of measurements on the hour, every desk, on the window, outside the window. There was a wealth of data. It was amazing the work that they did. And we also replicated this for our London office, so we could compare the two offices as well. So we hadn't had the opportunity to design the lighting there, but we did have the opportunity here. So from that initial proposal, we've then gone back to actually test what we've done. We also had the benefit of Luke Price, also wanted to look at some office spaces and come and take measurements, look at the flicker, look at the daylighting, look at the electric lighting, such that he could compare that with other offices. And so we had the benefit of his results as well. So there's no unconscious bias with our own results. We had somebody else that we could back that up with, and I think that's really important. As a slide to side, a number of offices we've been involved with, we've had scenarios where the landlord or the tenant haven't been fully sure of the type of building that they're moving into from a daylight perspective. So although there are BREEAM standards, etc., the data about the daylighting is hidden away quite, tucked away within that data. Excuse me, could I possibly have a glass of water? Thank you. Sorry, excuse me. Do apologise. So what we find is we've got to try and help those people understand if they're going to be leasing that building, what are they actually going to be getting when they take that building? And as I said, the information is tucked away. So we've got to do something, I think, to make that data more available and actually bring daylight and views and glare and blinds and bring all of those subjects much higher up the criteria. When people are looking to decide on a building, they quite often look at the volume of the space, how close it is to local transport, and quite often forget about the daylighting. So the second project is an atrium space where people were suffering from glare, whether that be the patients in the space or whether that be the receptionist, etc. And we got asked to have a look at that space. So the first thing we did was to measure what was there, measure the lux levels, measure the brightness of the surfaces, and then take a step back and say, well, how might this have happened that the space is too bright, and what can we do about it? And more importantly, the client only had one opportunity to put this right. As you imagine trying to close an atria space in a hospital and actually integrate something new into that space when it was finished, when it was open, there's a time issue there, there's a cost issue there. So we started looking around and we came across Jan Weinhold's work, Daylight Glare Probability, and this project was back in 2010, completed in 2012, and I think he presented that work in 2009, and I think it was originally 2006. So still, it was a 4-year period from when it was originally created to when we actually then made use of it. But there were no case studies. We couldn't go to the client and say, here's a case study that this is definitely going to work. So again, it was about saying to them, we've measured what's there, we've created some models that replicate what's there as an empty space, and now what we're going to do is use the daylight glare probability technique to actually start looking at what's happening as we put different elements into the space, as we put different ideas into the space. So we had various shading systems, trying to recreate north lights, but the client had said they didn't want to completely lose the sunlight. They didn't want to kill the space. They still wanted some dynamic lighting in there. And what really worked for us was to say to the client, well, the DGP value is this, and this is what it means, but actually, that red section, that's like looking at an external advertising sign selling white trainers outdoors. That's how bright it would appear, but you've got that inside your space. So turning everything into layman's terms for the client, such that they could understand what we're actually trying to do. And just to finish off, this is actually where the finished space on the right-hand side and the analysed space on the same day on the left-hand side. And of course, what you have to do is go back and measure that. So you've got these DGP values, but what does that mean in terms of the brightness of the surfaces, the lux levels that you experience in there on clear days and sunny days? And I'm pleased to say this was a success. And as a result, the other 2 atria were completed in the same way. Moving a little bit away from research, and it's great to hear that there's a discussion about this later, we've taken the opportunity during the lockdown when all of our staff, 900 staff, went to work from home. We've taken the opportunity to survey them and ask them about their home lighting experience. Now, we didn't hide the fact that we were asking them about their home lighting experience. It was quite clear that that's what we wanted to know about. maybe there's a little bit of bias there. But it didn't surprise us that people were sat within 3 meters of a window, because nobody has a deep plan home, or not many people have a deep plan home. But what is interesting when you think about that is, at some point we're going to ask them to go back into an office space, and they might be 7 meters, they might be 8 meters from a window, they might have their back to a window, but they've actually been blessed in their home space of being close to a window. And what was also interesting is that 45% of the people had a view of nature. And when I sat and thought about our office spaces, we don't really offer people that from all of our office spaces, from all of the seating positions in our office spaces. So what do we change about where we sit people? What do we change about what we do when people come back to the office, such that we can start tapping into this? I think there's a lot more work to do here, and I'm sure there is a lot of work now going on about people's experience from working from home and what they do as they come back into the office space. And I think it's no surprise, given that so many people were sat close to a window, I don't think it's any surprise that then nearly half of them weren't using any electric lighting during the day. Now, there's a caveat there. We actually don't know what the lighting levels were at their desk positions. So in some ways, it's good to see that half aren't using the electric lighting, but we don't know what lighting levels, so we've got to be a bit careful. But there's a quality about daylight. So if they are sat within 3 meters of a window, then they've got a quality of light that you're just not going to get from daylighting, from electric lighting. So again, when they come back to the office, we need to somehow make sure that we're giving people that kind of environment. So as well as taking clients on the journey, as well as talking to landlords, as well as looking at our own data to see how we might go about changing things, we've also got accreditation systems. We've got LEED, we've got WELL, we've got BREEAM, etc. And we've got to have a think about how we engage with these programs, because quite often they will ask you, does your design comply with EN 12464, 17037, etc., etc. And if you're introducing innovation into a space, you're not necessarily always going to be fully compliant to the absolute letter. So for example, this staircase, have we got 200 lux uniformly on every tread all of the time through the day? And the answer is potentially not. What we've got here with this staircase is we wanted to make use of the geometry of the staircase. We wanted to make use of the beauty it could create within the space and animate that space in the middle of the office. So we had 12 lights up on the soffit, one for each hour, and they faded on and off in a circle such that you had these patterns of light passing around the space. So it looks great, it makes the space look great, it feels great, but as a connected load, it's quite high. In terms of meeting a standard, you could argue it potentially doesn't, but in terms of being safe, in terms of enhancing the environment, in terms of being a positive change and a positive step forward, it most certainly is. And so we need to work early with the assessors and the accreditation tools to let them know what we're thinking about, where we might find an opportunity to do something different. And whilst I appreciate they do have innovation sections, we need to just try and actually do more of that, I would say. And so to finish up, really, I started to think about how do we actually do more of this? How do we do this more safely? How do we bring this whole process forward, bringing research into practice? And it made me think about Lighting Guide 5. Society of Light and Lighting produce Lighting for Education and a document. And quite a number of years ago now, could be well over 10 years ago, we're still using daylight factors for lighting for education, but we knew about climate-based daylight modeling. We knew it was a thing, we knew the work John had done, and we knew we wanted to be using it in the future. So in that particular revision, we said to people, still use daylight factors, but actually have a think about climate-based daylight modeling, because it's going to become a thing in the future. And I do wonder if with our standards and our lighting guides, if we ought to be, as well as having the section at the end which talks about the documents that have been used to produce that guide, if we ought to have an appendix where, say, 6 or 10 of the best pieces of research about what's going to happen next are also included in those standards and guides as well, such that more people can be reading about this more quickly. And one that stands out, and it stood out to me at the symposium in Berlin, was the gaze analysis. And I would love to see some of that make its way into the next Lighting for Offices standard, maybe into architecture as well, into architectural documents, and just get more people talking about it. Thank you.